This is my attempt to take you through how to make 2 lovely sourdough loaves. The ingredients are quite simple. For this recipe I'm using 875 grams of flour, 800 grams of organic strong bread flour, and 75 grams of brown flour, but I've divided that between 37 grams of whole wheat and 37 grams of brown rye flour. To that I'm adding 750 grams of warm water, but I'm starting with 700 grams and I'm going to keep 50 grams aside. Just mix the flour together with the water with your hand. The idea here is to mix slowly, don't overwork the dough, but make sure all the flour and the water is well mixed without creating too much form in the dough. Once it's mixed, set aside for 10 minutes. Once the dough's autolyzed, it should be nice and soft. Add 150 grams of the levain and the 50 grams of warm water. To mix the levain and the dough, the water should help to soften everything, but just use a pinching action, folding over the dough, over the levain, pinching and combining that way. You don't want to overwork the dough because that will make it too tough too quickly. So just lightly pinching through to make sure the dough is combined fully with the levain. Once the levain's mixed with the dough, you want to set it aside, cover it with a tea towel for 10 minutes before adding salt. After 10 minutes, add the salt over the top and use a pinching action again just to make sure that's mixed in. Once the salt's all mixed in, we'll just give it a fold, and that's just wet your hand, grab a piece of dough from underneath, stretch it up, pull it over the top and press it down. Turn the bowl slightly and repeat until you've made your way all the way around the bowl. That should just build a little bit of structure in the dough. Take the dough, put the dough in a thick walled bowl. That's going to be covered in cling film, and we'll put it in a warm place. That will start the proving. In total, it will be in the proving for 4 hours. During the proving stage, you want to fold it regularly. At first, fold it once every 15 minutes. So take it out of the warm place it in, uncover it. Again, wet your hand, grab from underneath, stretch up and fold across and repeat all the way round. Do that every 15 minutes for the first 3 times and then extend those times to once every 30 minutes, and then it will do the remainder of the proving time in the warm place in a total of 4 hours altogether. At the end of the 4 hours proving, you should see some development of your dough, some air bubbles on the top, and the dough should have doubled in size approximately. We just empty the dough out onto a work surface. Once it's emptied out, just use a scraper, a little bit of water I use rather than flour, on the hands and on the scraper. Divide the dough into 2 and loosely shape using your scraper into 2 rounds. This does take some getting used to, and you get better at it the more you practice it. A little bit of water helps. Before you can shape your bread and put it in the baskets, you do need to cover the baskets in rice flour to stop the dough sticking. Be generous in covering the work surface and the top of the dough in flour, and then take a scraper and take each dough in turn, turn them over so the top is now facing down. Try to use flour to make sure that the dough doesn't stick to your hands, and shape accordingly to fit the basket. The first one is a batten shape, so we just spread it out wide and make a kind of envelope, pull out the bottom, and then from the top fold down once, made it round twice, 3 times, and then the bottom piece comes over the top, just pressing to make a seam and just pinching to seal the dough, and then that will go back into the basket, ready for the second proof. Once it's in the basket, we're just going to put it in a bag and seal those bags, and I'm going to leave that for 20 minutes. At the end of the 20 minutes, I'm going to put it in the fridge, and it's going to go in for 14 hours for the second proofing. Once after the 14 hours in the fridge, then it's ready to bake. So now, before you want to bake your bread, take 2 casserole dishes with the lids on, put them in the oven, and you're going to crank up the oven to 270, and that heats for an hour to make sure that the oven is really hot and both dishes are nice and hot too. When you're ready to bake your dough, we're just going to put some semolina on a board that will stop the dough sticking because it's still quite wet. Empty the dough out and use a blade or a serrated edge just to cut through, scoring the top of the dough. Then we're going to put the dough straight into the casserole pots. Just try and shift it off and put the lid back on and put it back in the oven, and that goes in for 20 minutes with the lid on, and then 20 minutes with the lid off. After 20 minutes baking with the lid on and then 20 minutes with the lid off, we kept an eye on it, and we can see the loaf is cooked nicely. The top has a caramelization. If you just tap it on the bottom, you should hear a nice hollow sound, and just put it on a cooling rack and allow the loaves to cool.